We were fools to try to do what we did. Myself, no better than a dropout. My best friend, a quack doctor, and an engineer who drank all his pay. I don't know why we thought we could do any good. Perhaps it's only natural to try to right the wrongs of one's life when given such a large chance at redemption, though I suspect that in reality we all selfishly wanted to keep Thalia alive. She was, after all, the best of us, and we lamented the day she was diagnosed. The bad doctor was the one who called me in the dead of night, panicked but elated. She said she had figured out a way to prolong Thalia's time, perhaps give chance for a cure. She told me to get that drunkard on the phone and have him at my home tomorrow, and we would begin. I hung up and glanced to my left. Thalia tossed in her sleep, her breathing labored. My heart sank, and I dialed up the drunkard. The next day we began our work, using scraps from old projects of the drunkard and an MRI machine from the poor doctor's work. We asked how she had thought of this, and she simply said it came to her, as though planted in her mind. We didn't push much farther. We simply asked how it would work. She explained that it would make her half dead, but thus half alive, doubling her time. I'm not a doctor. Neither was he. We didn't argue. They worked, and I explained to Thalia the plan. She seemed to only wish to go through with it, to put me at ease, and it made me feel so small that she'd accepted her fate as I clawed against it. I spent the next few weeks teaching her to communicate through Morse code, using her brain activity as the measure. They had finished by the 4th week, and Thalia was asleep in the machine, a twisted monstrosity of metal, and only a small screen to which we could communicate with her. She spoke, in that rudimentary language, of a large forest with birdsong all around, though she'd yet to see a bird. The day after, things began to break down. She said that she felt fallen, as though she could hear footsteps against the background, and that she felt as though she could see movement in the corner of her eyes, and that she was scared, but that was the extent of it. Another week passed. Coming and going was the day of her supposed death, as any other, and the machine continued to track her activity. She spoke no farther of the shifting images in her brain. Perhaps it was just an illusion. Another week of silence, and the day I'll never forget. There was a spike. She spoke of her ex-husband from a past marriage being there with her, and that she felt that he was the one that was following her, that he had chased her down and stabbed her with a makeshift spear till she died, only for her to reawaken later and the events to repeat. 13 times she said she died, and on the 14th, he just ran up and stared at her, a look of confusion on his face. He never spoke a word, no matter how she protested. I called upon my co-conspirators, and we gathered to discuss things. We brainstormed for a while, until I put forth the suggestion that would ruin us all. What if we put in an object? We laughed. But still, that night, I found myself holding my handgun, placing it half disassembled into the machine, in her lap. I watched the screen carefully. She messaged me quickly, saying that the weapon had appeared in her hands and that the birdsong had ceased, and now a blanket of silence was deafening her. Her husband now looked frightened in the distance, but if he ever came to her again, she would fire. I sat beside that cursed machine all night, watching the little graph. Just before midnight, she signaled. She said he had attacked her again, this time with a large scythe, and that she had fired upon him, emptying the weapon into his chest and his skull. He had looked scared the entire time, his eyes frenzied, and when he finally died, he blew away in the breeze, as though he weren't real. The birdsong had returned, and now she felt safe. She told me to get to sleep, and that she would see me soon. I woke up in the morning to her labored breathing. She was beside me once more, a smile spread across thin lips. Watched her for a number of minutes before deciding to surprise her with coffee as I used to. I turned the news on as I set about the simple task. I'll not forget what the reporter said. It seems the Reaper has retired, turned in his scythe, and gone away. That was the headline, at least. I watched in horror, since just before midnight last night, it seemed no one had died. A man had been impaled through his heart, the blood loss causing major motor function damage, but yet his eyes followed the doctor's penlight, pain and horror showing through the pale blackness of his gaze. I stepped out into the garage, curious as to what I might see. The twisted machine of metal set, as it had always done for the past few weeks, though its occupant was empty as I had believed, and in her place was a small pile of sand. If anyone ever reads this, or hears this, please know, we conspired with things we should not have, and now all shall feel our meddling. But I will not apologize. That morning, as I laughed with my Thalia once more, my coffee has never tasted so good.